Beyond the Gates spoilers teased that Bill had secretly added a clause to his insurance policy, one that would alter the game entirely. On the surface, the arrangement looked straightforward. Hayley, his new wife, stood beside him at every social function, the image of devoted companionship. She smiled for cameras, signed documents at his side, and whispered promises of a shared future. But beneath that polished surface, between the signatures and fine print, Bill had laid a trap. The clause ensured that in the event of his death, Hayley would receive nothing. Not a cent of the insurance payout, not a share of the estate, not even access to the trust fund he had so casually mentioned over dinners and late-night wine. Hayley's confidence was absolute, or at least it had been. She believed she had already won Bill's trust. She had spent months cultivating the role of the perfect partner, attentive, charming, and understanding. Her friends, especially Randy, often teased her that she was playing the part too well. But Hayley's ambition didn't leave room for hesitation. She saw Bill as her prize, the culmination of years spent observing, adapting, and perfecting the art of persuasion. And yet, in her eagerness to secure her future, she had underestimated him. Bill was not the naive, aging businessman she imagined him to be. From the beginning, he could read it in the way she handled his accounts, in how her eyes flickered at the mention of assets and investments. He had dealt with people like her before, smooth talkers with soft hands and sharper instincts. But unlike those who fell prey to flattery, Bill saw an opportunity. He decided to keep her close and learn her rhythm before she could execute whatever plan she was quietly assembling. When he married Hayley, people whispered that he was foolish, that he had fallen for beauty over sense. They didn't realize that his sense had never left him. He loved control too much to surrender it. Every contract, every legal form, every signature she witnessed had been carefully worded, each a small fortress built around his wealth. Even the trust funds he contributed to for future children were structured to appear generous while ensuring his absolute control. The clause was his masterpiece. If Hayley bore him a child, the trust fund for their child's education would be automatically released into a separate account managed by Bill's longtime financial advisor, not by Hayley herself. The money was for the child, no exceptions, no loopholes. But if no child existed, the funds would revert entirely to Bill. No one but his lawyer and his accountant knew of this detail. Hayley had been fed only fragments of information, enough to make her believe she had influence without ever holding actual power. Hayley, on the other hand, had been growing restless. Her conversations with Randy had turned increasingly urgent. Randy, a con artist with a gambler's patience, reminded her that time was running out. "He's older, sure," Randy had said one night, "but not stupid. You've got to act before he rewrites you out of everything." The plan had been simple in theory: slow poisoning, subtle enough that no one would notice. A few drops in his evening whiskey, maybe a supplement swapped for something less harmless. But theory rarely survives contact with reality. Caroline was the first to notice something off. As Bill's personal assistant and longtime confidant, she had seen more than most. She noticed the bottles Hayley replaced in the cabinet, the way she hovered a little too closely when Bill took his nightly drink. Caroline's loyalty to Bill was absolute. Not because of love but because of history. He had saved her career once, covering a scandal that could have destroyed her. Now, watching Hayley's quiet manipulation, Caroline's instincts screamed that something dangerous was brewing. She didn't go to Bill immediately. Instead, she started her own quiet investigation, checking pharmacy records, noting changes in Bill's behavior, tracking Hayley's movements. What she found unsettled her: traces of chemicals that had no business being in their home, receipts for small purchases made under fake names, calls to Randy's number at odd hours. Bill had sensed something too. For weeks he had felt an unease he couldn't name. He noticed that his whiskey tasted slightly different, that Hayley's expressions were just a shade too practiced. When Caroline finally approached him with her findings, he listened in silence, then smiled a grim, knowing smile. "I told you she was ambitious," he said. "Now we see how far ambition will take her." That night, Bill poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. He watched Hayley across the room, her beauty sharpened by candlelight, her voice honeyed as ever. When she excused herself to freshen up, He emptied the glass into the sink and poured a new one from a bottle he had opened himself. He was done pretending to be oblivious. Meanwhile, Hayley was spiraling. She had finally found a copy of Bill's insurance documents hidden in his study. It took weeks of pretending not to care, of waiting until he was out for a business meeting, of convincing Caroline to take a day off. When she saw the clauser name absent from every section where she had expected it, her breath caught. It felt like the air had been stolen from the room. There it was in black and white. The insurance beneficiary was listed as to be assigned to direct descendants, with a secondary clause granting residual control to a charitable trust under Bill's name. Hayley's shock quickly turned to fury. She had invested years in this man, endured his temper, his controlling nature, his constant tests of loyalty. To find out she would walk away with nothing less than nothing made her vision blur with rage. She called Randy that night, her voice shaking. "He outsmarted me," she hissed. "He is not dying. He is laughing at me." Randy tried to calm her. "Then we wait," he said. "We adjust. If the money's tied to a child, give him a reason to start that process. You're still in the game." But Hayley wasn't listening. Patience had always been Randy's virtue, not hers. The next few weeks turned into a slow war between appearances and intentions. Bill, fully aware of her discovery but pretending ignorance, played the role of affectionate husband with unnerving ease. He sent her flowers, planned weekend trips, and spoke casually about their future. Each gesture was calculated to unnerve her, to make her question what he knew. Hayley, increasingly paranoid, began to see traps in every smile. She stopped eating meals he prepared, avoided drinks unless she mixed them herself. The irony wasn't lost on Bill. The poisoner now feared poison. Caroline watched from the periphery, quietly documenting everything. She knew that confronting Hayley outright would achieve nothing. Instead, she made sure Bill's doctor had a file ready, should anything suspicious happen. She also ensured that the household staff, discreet but loyal, kept an eye on Hayley's movements. The house, once a place of marital pretense, had become a chessboard. Late one evening, Hayley tried again. A new plan, more desperate. She replaced one of Bill's daily vitamins with a capsule laced with a slow-acting compound Randy had supplied. But Bill had already anticipated it. He'd noticed her subtle switch and pocketed the capsule before taking it. Days later, he presented it to her without a word, leaving it on her bedside table like a calling card. She stared at it for hours, realizing the balance of power had completely shifted. Bill's calmness terrified her more than anger ever could. He began talking openly about estate planning, inviting lawyers to the house, and casually mentioning charitable endowments. Each mention was a knife twisting deeper. He even joked about writing a memoir story of betrayal and redemption, of how people reveal their true selves when money's involved. Randy grew nervous. He told Hayley to step back, to wait for another opening. But she couldn't stop. The more Bill demonstrated his control, the more she needed to reclaim it. Her obsession consumed her. She began looking for alternate paths, hidden safes, forgotten documents, anything that would give her leverage. But each discovery only confirmed the same thing: Bill had already sealed every door before she ever walked through them. Then Caroline made a mistake. In her eagerness to protect Bill, she left a file on her desk, a list of the clauses Hayley wasn't supposed to see. Hayley found it, photographed it, and finally understood the full extent of Bill's plan. The trust fund clause, the null inheritance condition, the education fund reserved strictly for potential children. Every detail screamed one truth: Bill had never trusted her, not even on their wedding day. It was around this time that Hayley stopped sleeping. Nights became long stretches of pacing, of staring at herself in the mirror and whispering half-formed plans. Randy's calls went unanswered. When he finally showed up unannounced, she didn't open the door. Inside, she was unraveling, caught between rage and fear, between wanting to flee and wanting to win. Bill, for his part, watched the slow disintegration with quiet satisfaction. He never raised his voice, never accused her directly. Instead, he treated her with unnerving gentleness. It was as if he pitied her. And in a way, he did. She thought she could outsmart a man who built his life on contracts, he told Caroline one morning. But people like Hayley never read the fine print, they only look at the numbers. The balance of power had inverted completely. Hayley, Once the predator, was now the prey. But her story was not finished. Beneath her fear, something colder was forming, a determination that bordered on madness. She began to plan again, not with poison this time, but with precision. If she couldn't kill him, she would find a way to make him lose control. She would force him into a mistake, one that would expose him to the same legal traps he had set for her. Bill, however, remained one step ahead. He knew her too well, and every move she made only tightened the invisible cage he had built around her. What neither of them realized was that Caroline, though loyal, had her own motives, and she was growing tired of playing watchdog. The line between ally and adversary was starting to blur, and the mansion that once symbolized wealth and safety was becoming a stage for something far more dangerous than betrayal. The night before everything would change, the air in the house was thick with tension. Bill sat in his study, reading through a folder marked amendment. Hayley stood at the door, watching him, her expression unreadable. She had discovered something that could turn the tide, something buried deep in those same documents he thought protected him. But whether it would save her or destroy her would depend entirely on what she did next. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, both of them knew that the game they had been playing was about to turn dead lie for real this time. The following days moved with an eerie stillness that felt almost staged. Bill carried himself as though nothing had changed, his voice calm, his habits predictable, his temper non-existent. Yet beneath the surface, every gesture he made was deliberate, every silence strategic. He had turned the entire house into a psychological battlefield, and Hayley, despite her newfound determination, couldn't escape the sense that she was walking through a maze designed by someone who already knew her every move. That night, she acted. The folder marked amendment wasn't just paperwork, it was leverage. Hidden among the legal clauses and trust arrangements was a memorandum, unsigned but clearly drafted by Bill, that mentioned transferring a portion of his assets to a contingency beneficiary. The name wasn't specified, but the timing suggested it was recent. To Hayley, it could mean only one thing: Bill was preparing to cut her off permanently, even from any indirect benefit tied to his estate. She realized this was her last opportunity to regain control. She approached him after dinner, her tone measured, her expression a mask of calm. "I've been thinking," she said, pouring them both a drink from the same bottle this time, a small performance of trust. "We should revisit our plans for the future: college funds, insurance, all of it. If we're really going to build a family, it has to be clear." Bill studied her face, his gaze steady but unreadable. Then, with a small smile, he said, "You're right. It should be clear. Tomorrow, we'll go through everything together." That answer sent a chill through her. Tomorrow was Bill's word for control. It meant "I'll decide when and how." She nodded, forcing a smile, but inside her mind, the walls were collapsing. She needed something immediate, something irreversible. Hayley waited until he went upstairs, then returned to the study. She opened his desk drawer, searching for the original contract. She found the safe key taped under the desk, just as she had guessed, and pulled the safe door open. Inside were layers of documents: investment portfolios, family trusts, even letters to his lawyer. But there was also something else, a small silver recorder, its light blinking faintly. When she pressed play, Bill's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, it means you've crossed a line. I warned you once, everything in this house is accounted for. You think you're hiding your intentions, but I've known them since the day you arrived. The question isn't whether I'll stop you, it's how far you're willing to go before you stop yourself." The message ended. Hayley froze, realizing the extent of his manipulation. He had anticipated this moment too. She placed the recorder back exactly as she found it, her hands trembling. The realization that every step she had taken was part of his script broke something inside her. But the moment of fear gave birth to something sharper: cold, unflinching resolve. She needed Randy. He was the only person left who could help her escape this spiral. When she finally reached him, his voice was different, tired, cautious. "You're not listening," he said. "You think you can still win this, but he's already written the ending. Get out while you can." But Hayley couldn't. To leave meant defeat, meant walking away empty-handed after years of deception and humiliation. "No," she said quietly. He took everything from me. I'm not leaving without something to show for it. The next morning, Caroline noticed the tension immediately. Bill's eyes were brighter, more alert than usual. She knows, he told her quietly, over coffee. It's just a matter of time before she tries again. Caroline nodded, but something in her expression wavered. She had begun to pity Hayley, despite herself. Watching the young woman unravel under Bill's calculated cruelty reminded her too much of her own paced off being cornered, powerless, desperate to survive. Later that day, Hayley found Caroline in the greenhouse. You're close to him, Hayley said softly. You know how he thinks. Tell me what he's planning. Caroline hesitated, her loyalty warring with guilt. You think you're the first to try? She said finally. You're not. He's done this before. Different women, same story. He makes them feel safe, then tests them until they break. You're just another test. The revelation struck Hayley like a slap. So this was Bill's real pattern, no just manipulation for protection, but a perverse experiment in loyalty. She wasn't his first, and likely wouldn't be his last. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. That's all I needed to know. That night, she didn't reach for poison or deception. Instead, she turned to the one thing Bill hadn't anticipated: truth. When he came home, she confronted him directly, her words sharp and deliberate. You think you've won, don't you? You think this is about money, but it's about power. You destroy people to prove you can control them. Bill didn't raise his voice. I protect myself, he said. You came into this marriage with lies. Did you expect me to be blind? You protect yourself by destroying everyone around you, she said, stepping closer. You made me into the thing you wanted to fight. You wanted me to betray you so you could be right about people. Bill's composure faltered, if only for a second. You knew what this was, he said quietly. You just didn't expect to lose. Hayley smiled then, not with affection but with defiance. You're wrong. I haven't lost yet. She left the room before he could answer. For the first time, Bill felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Hayley wasn't acting like a cornered con artist anymore. She was calm, deliberate. He checked the safe again that night, verifying that everything was in place. It was, but the next morning, the folder labeled amendment was gone. When he confronted her, she didn't deny it. You wanted a game, she said. Now we're both playing. Bill realized then that she had done something he hadn't expected. She had copied the documents and replaced the originals with altered versions. The clauses now listed spousal trust under review pending settlement. It was subtle enough that no one would notice until it mattered, and by then, it would be too late. He couldn't accuse her publicly without exposing his own secret contracts and manipulations. Legally, it would appear as if he had changed the terms himself. The realization hit him like a blow. She had found his weakness. For all his preparation, he had never accounted for the possibility that Hayley would stop playing defense and start rewriting the rules. Meanwhile, Caroline watched the chaos unfold, torn between satisfaction and dread. She knew Hayley's victory would be short-lived. Bill was too cunning to be cornered for long. But there was something poetic in watching the balance shift, however briefly. Days later, Hayley received a message from Randy. He had heard about the forged documents and wanted no part in what came next. You're in too deep, he warned. You think you've won, but he's not finished. He was right. Bill wasn't finished. Instead of confronting Hayley directly, he began working through silence and omission, removing her access to accounts, cutting her off from their shared assets one by one. He turned the world around her into a prison made of paper and legalities. Every bill, every transaction, every signature became a reminder that she was still trapped inside his web. Caroline, watching both of them crumble, began to act in secret. She arranged a meeting between Hayley and Bill's attorney, under the pretense of clarifying some documents. But her real motive was different. She wanted the truth to surface. All of it. She had spent years enabling Bill's manipulations, and now, seeing the destruction they caused, she was done protecting him. During the meeting, the attorney revealed something that changed everything. The clause Hayley had altered was only one of many. Bill had prepared multiple versions of his contracts, each stored in different locations, each one designed to counter any attempt at tampering. What Hayley thought she had changed was only a decoy file. The real documents remained untouched, sealed in a private vault. When Hayley learned this, something inside her snapped. She laughed loud, bitter, uncontrollable laughter that filled the office. "Of course," she said finally. "He even planned for my betrayal." She went home that night and packed her things. She didn't tell Bill she was leaving, she simply vanished. Bill returned to an empty house, her closet bare, her keys on the counter. For a long time, he stood in silence, then poured himself a drink, the same whiskey she had once poisoned, and whispered, "Finally." But victory didn't feel like triumph. The quiet was heavier than he expected. The house, stripped of tension, felt hollow. Caroline noticed the change immediately. Bill became quieter, more withdrawn. His routines remained precise, but his eyes seemed older. She asked once, "Are you relieved it's over?" He didn't answer. Weeks later, Bill received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a single-page photocopy of one of his contracts, with a handwritten note, "Check your vault." When he did, he discovered that the real documents were gone. Somehow, Hayley had found a way to access them after all. The vault was empty except for a small recorder, the same one he had used to warn her before. When he pressed play, her voice came through. "You said I'd stop myself before you stopped me. Maybe you were right. But you forgot one thing, Bill. You taught me how to plan." The recording ended there. Caroline found him standing in the study hours later, staring at the open safe. "She took them," he said quietly. "Everyone." "What will you do?" she asked. Bill smiled faintly. "I suppose I'll see how good my own game really was." Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, steady, unending. Somewhere across the city, Hayley boarded a train with a single suitcase, the documents tucked safely inside. She didn't know yet what she would do with them: sell them, expose him, or simply disappear. But for the first time in years, the decision was hers alone. And in that freedom, however fragile, she finally felt what Bill never could: victory without control, peace without possession. The story between them had ended not with poison or inheritance, but with silence, a silence that carried the weight of everything left unspoken between two people who had destroyed each other trying to win.